if a male dolphin and a female dolphin have this connection, another male dolphin can see that female and break that alliance.
The guest for this episode is Samantha Trodick. I would go by the name of Sam. She's majoring in psychology and minoring in neuroscience in Drew University. The paper or assignment she have wrote, guided by the professor named of Dr. Drew D. Amore, is the communication of dolphins and whales. We talk about what is communication, the history of killer whales, including the evolution and vocal dialects, the history of bottlenose dolphins, including brain size and personality, and the communication of whales. Right, thank you so much for being here. And your topic is talking about the communication of dolphins and whales.
Yeah.
And let's start from the basics. So what is communication?
Basically, communication is defined as like the learning through imitation or observing behaviors of others through like their lifespan. So the basic example you can say is like a baby learning to talk. Learning by hearing their parents talking to you, and that's what the imitation comes from, the imitation of sounds, vowels, letters that come up to words.
Yeah. So why is that so important in our daily lives?
It's for like humans or like animals and humans?
Like, let's do it both sides.
Both sides. Yeah. So it's just important because basically just to see what you're thinking. In daily lives, I feel like if we had no communication whatsoever in anything, we wouldn't know what's happening. We would only be going off of body language, which speaks a lot. But if I'm sitting in a position and I'm like hunched over and leaning it back, you'd think I'm like upset. Yeah. But if I'm standing straight and composed, you'd think I'm confident or happy. But that could be the opposite without talking to that person. Yes. So I think it plays a big role in who we are as humans.
Yeah, because like I do notice that like communication is not just by like words, but it's also like how we express ourselves, how we show ourselves, and how we like represent ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, speaking about that, like you talk about like production learning. So what is it and why is that so important?
So it is using two mechanisms of animals or humans' bodies. It's their respiratory system that provides airflow through under pressure, or just normally our airflow can be in the pressure of gravity as well. And the phonatory system that holds the sound production apparatus. So basically your vocal cords and stuff like that that are used to communicate.
Okay. So now let's go to like your like main topic, which is like killer whales, and like how does it like the evolution of like killer whales and like the vocal dialects. So like there's a culture evolution of animals, and you stated 3 different models. Like, do you mind like talk about that?
Yeah. So the first one is vertical, which is from your parent to you. So just parent to offspring. And the other one is oblique, which is from a member of that parental generation. So say your grandma or your grandpa. Other than your parents. So grandma, grandpa that come to you. And then horizontal, which is among members of the same generation. So your friends, you're learning different communication with them as well.
So it's something like genetics?
It doesn't have to be. The vertical parent to offspring, it can be when dealing with killer whales because they do get their calls from their parents. Yeah. But I think it's more of an imitation learning type of thing because you can get genetics from your grandparents. Like for example, my brother has blue eyes. Both my parents don't, but my grandma does. So those genetics skipped my mom's or my dad's generation and went to him. Yeah. But I feel like these can be like a mixture of two as well. But I feel like for animals generally, it's more imitation wise.
So it's more like the son is gonna like mimic the parents.
Yeah. So like because their communication isn't words like ours are. Yeah. They are learning more on the clicks and the sounds, and then the body language and imitation.
Yeah, and you have stated that killer whales have same learning abilities as dolphin. So what studies that found? Like, what is it?
There's been multiple different studies. Trying to see their calls are very similar because they have the same whistles type calls.
Mhm.
I'm not sure if I found any studies that kind of put them two together.
Mhm.
But just from researching all of these different articles in this paper, there are like very much similarities of how their calls work, what they sound like, what they seem to be, and like the different aspects they're used to be
I think
too.
we're gonna go there like deeply later. So like, how do you think that the offspring learn from their parents?
I think it's just mainly imitation wise.
Imitation.
Because I feel like when I think about it, I think about how you watch something, say you
Mhm.
watch like a swimmer
Yeah.
and you try and imitate them.
Right.
So I feel like the offspring of the whales are the same way where they hear their parents do these
Mhm.
calls
Yep.
and they see what happens when those calls are made.
Mhm.
So they know, okay, if I do this, that's going to happen. Or if
Oh.
I make this call, they're going to come to me. So it's kind of like a imitation, strictly very imitation
Yeah.
behavior.
I think that like perfectly um like it's same to us human too. Like when you see like people playing like American football, like how like the quarterback throw the ball, like we
Yeah,
tend to like try to like mimic the person and do that like
exactly. Yeah.
position. Yeah, so like you also stated that whale are a social creature. Like why is that?
I feel like all of these animals have been social creatures,
Hmm.
mainly because their aspect of callings are just very much towards their pods. So it's
Hmm.
basically like their family.
Yeah.
Um, so dolphins and whales are both very social because they're always communicating. I feel like there was one of the studies that I read. Um, can't remember which one it was, but it's talked about like the different amount or the amount of
Hmm.
clicks there were in a
Yeah.
time period, and they found like close to hundreds, I think.
Wow.
So they're always communicating with each other,
Hmm.
whether it's seeking prey, getting away from predators, just echolocation. So it's like they are mainly talking when they're swimming.
Wow. But how? Like, do you have any idea on like how are they doing that? Like, because for us human, like when we're running, it's hard for us to like speak normally.
Yeah.
But
I
how?
haven't actually I didn't see anything in the papers that told me how they
Wow.
like when they're swimming, how
Uh-huh.
they communicate through that thing, which I didn't even think about that during the paper.
Oh,
That would be a cool thing to look at.
of
Like
course.
how they're swimming and they can do that at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, let's switch gears a bit. So now let's go to like bottlenose dolphins and include their like brain size and personality.
Mhm.
So why is bottlenose dolphins known to be a social creature like cetaceans,
Mhm.
and how is its brain size and personality?
There was a study I read
Yeah.
on basically they literally did a personality test
Wow.
on dolphins. So you know how you take those personality tests that are
Uh,
like you're open
yeah.
and you're bright, and they did like openness, sociability,
Uh-huh.
disagreeableness, and directedness,
Right.
and like made to see what dolphins are what.
Hmm.
And it was actually interesting because it showed that like all of 49 dolphins being asked of these questions, 85 had
Uh-huh.
or 85 of the dolphins altogether
Yeah.
had openness, directedness, disagreeableness,
Wow.
and social awareness. So it was
Hmm.
interesting to see that like they can like psychologically develop these type of abilities that we also have,
Uh-huh.
which kind of ties into the fact that the bottlenose dolphins have almost the same size brain as us. Thinking about it,
Wait,
so
really? Like,
they're very
wow.
similar. It's about 1.5 to 2.5 meters
Uh-huh.
in length. So that's like very close to primates.
Do they like compare the weights between like humans' brain
I don't
and
know. It says there's a range of like 650 to 1600 grams
uh-huh.
of like
Wow.
weight. So I don't know if that can deal with because it also can like inhibit the growth in like the temperature of the water and like where they're like living in.
Hmm.
It can alter if their brain is bigger, smaller. So there were some studies that looking at it, but there hasn't been any that's like significantly found those type of things.
Yeah, so like it's the dolphins, like in that study, it's the dolphins like they catch it from the wild and they did experiment on them, or they just like
Um,
wear them
I
up
can't
or
remember exactly, but I
mm,
think this type of study was
yeah,
on captured dolphins.
capture it.
Um, but I feel like if it wasn't, they could also do it in the ocean, like do it
In
in
the
the
ocean.
free
Yeah,
ocean. Just watching off their body language and stuff like that,
yeah.
because mainly like openness, sociability is mainly very much body language
Mhm.
or even disagreeableness, because they can like get away from the pod, or like you can see aggression. So I think either way you can see those different aspects in it.
Right. So let's go into gender a little bit. So you have stated that male dolphins usually are the main character when building alliance with other dolphins, and
Hmm.
have stated that there are two known orders of alliance. Like, can you talk about it?
Yeah, so the
Yeah.
first order is the formation and maintenance of
Yeah.
courtship with females. So that's basically a male dolphin seeing a female dolphin, or listening to their call and saying, "Ooh, I like that whistle."
Mhm.
Um, and they kind of go in basically like the talking stage of
Yeah.
humans, like getting to know
Mhm.
someone, and it can last from minutes to weeks. So, and then the second order is the cooperation of the first order to take females from other alliances or defend them from males. So it's basically, if a male dolphin and a female dolphin have this connection,
Mhm.
another male dolphin can see that female and break that alliance.
Wow.
So yeah, I found that super interesting that
Uh-huh.
like dolphins can literally see the connection happening and then break it off and like try and take that female.
Wow.
I know. I was like, that's kind of crazy, because that's something that like humans have done. Like if
Yeah.
like your best friend has a girlfriend, and you're like, I kind of like her more, and they try and get in there.
Yeah. And do they ending up like breaking up? And
It depends, but they usually, I think, I remember, I might be mistaken on this, but
uh,
they females can be with multiple different males and have different offsprings. So then that pod is just really like mixed of different offspring
yeah,
too.
because like in a human world, we're like, oh, you need to get married, and like in order to like have your own baby, you need a certification saying that you two are
Hmm.
married, and like there's a bunch of procedures going on. But in like the animal kingdom, I do think that it's gonna be like where like how do like I know like you have like a husband or not?
They don't.
They don't, so
They
they
don't.
just like just
Yeah.
mated each other.
Yeah. They
Yeah,
just do what nature says.
yeah. If humans like that,
I feel
right?
like the planet would have too many people.
Yeah, like can you go to like more specific like how dolphins communicate?
So they have a different they basically have like whistles,
Uh-huh.
very similar to whales.
Yeah.
And they actually have, each dolphin
Hmm.
has their curated signature whistle.
Uh-huh.
So kind of like how every football team has their specific like helmet design,
Yeah.
or like their uniform colors and stuff like that. That's the same thing as dolphins. They have that signature whistle,
Hmm.
which is learned. They
Yeah.
pick different parts of things that they have heard and put it together. Um, but it's basically gives them a sense of where that individual is, who that individual is, and so forth.
Like I would like to talk more about the signature whistle. So how would other dolphins know that oh this specific like whistle belonged to like this dolphin and like that
I
belonged to
think it's
that?
just off of just how it happens. Like if they
Mhm.
hear that whistle, they could know, because I basically, it's like, say there's like a group of 10 dolphins.
Yeah.
Those 10 dolphins all have offspring. So there's 20. Those offspring hear all these 10 different whistles,
Mm-hmm.
and they can pick and match different like fragments of that whistle and put them
Right.
together.
Mm-hmm.
So then they know, oh, I got it from, like, they grew up with them, so they
Uh-huh.
know what dolphins what. It's almost like,
Right.
how do you know about how birds, like, they grow up in one space
Mm-hmm.
and then they'll migrate to another
Oh
place and come
yeah.
back? Also, like salmon, like they
Mm-hmm.
leave from that place that they were born and travel like miles and miles
Right.
during the winter and then come back to that same spot.
Yeah.
And like they don't have like a GPS.
Right.
So I feel like it's the same way, the how the dolphins are very similar, have similar callings to where they can figure out like that's my pod that I came from, or that specific person is relevant in there.
Oh yeah, like that makes so much sense because like during the winter break, I went to like SeaWorld
Mm-hmm.
in San Diego, and I was like, how do the dolphins know like which one of them is like the trainer? So I
Yeah,
do notice that like each of every single one of the trainer, like when they blow their
they have a
whistle,
different whistle.
yeah, it's like a different sound,
Mm-hmm.
and like when they blow it, the dolphin just like the specific dolphin would just immediately go to like the
Yeah,
specific
there's
trainer.
a study in here that I
Yeah.
found of two captured whale
Uh-huh.
or dolphins, and one was Icelandic and
Mm.
another one was from somewhere else. So they
Yeah.
were from two different oceans, like
Uh-huh.
bodies of water,
Right.
and they were put together. And after, I don't know how long it was, but it had to be like a few weeks or a few months after them being put together, they learned, like they made their own calls for each
Oh,
other. So
wow.
like their calls combined together. They had
Uh-huh.
two separate calls and they didn't
Mm.
know who they were, but then they came together.
So when it came together, does that mean like their like signature whistle has changed?
It,
Or
yeah, or they can make different callings
mm.
for the just the two of them because it was only them
Oh.
two in the tank.
So like you also said that dolphins are sociable creatures,
Mm-hmm.
and like that's something talking about like the in-group settings of dolphins.
Yeah.
Yeah, like let's go deeper into that.
So basically, one of the studies I found, dolphins in smaller groups
Mm-hmm.
that don't go higher than 10 dolphins
Yeah.
have very much higher rates of whistles,
Mm-hmm.
and it decreases as the group gets bigger.
Mm-hmm.
They usually don't use them to communicate, like their whistles and calls to communicate, but they can
Yeah.
also use like breach on the surface. So they
Mm.
use body language as well. So they'll breach on the surface together. Have you ever seen two dolphins
Oh
come up?
yeah.
That's basically them with their one of their pods just
Uh-huh.
going through the water swimming together. Because you never see
Oh,
two just by themselves.
right.
It's always two and like three in the water or
Yeah.
something like that. So they're always swimming together.
Mm.
Um, but I feel like if because their whistles are so high, when they're smaller together, I feel like it because there's just more cohesion in a smaller group than like a
Yeah.
big group. It's
Mm-hmm.
almost as if trying to get like the team all together, like a big team all together, and
Yeah.
everyone's having their own little conversations.
Right.
You don't know how to like decipher what's going on.
Yeah.
So I think that's because it's such a smaller group, they have higher rating whistles because they can talk to each other back and forth and know what's going on, if that makes
Yeah. Like,
sense.
will you consider that like I'm not sure what affects that. Is it the bar effect? Like when you're in the bar, there's a bunch of people talking, but like for example, me and you talking, you can like clearly hear like what I talk. So
Yeah,
would that apply to dolphins?
I think so. Because I have in my paper it's saying that it's
Mm-hmm.
understandable for a big group would have the whistles
Mm-hmm.
decrease
Yeah.
for the dolphins in that specific group to hear the different
Mm-hmm.
variations. So it's
Yeah.
very similar to if you're in a crowded bar and your friends across the room and you
Right.
can't hear them and you're like, "Ah." But if it's like only a group of 10 people,
Yeah.
you'd be able to hear them
That's
easily.
fair.
Yeah.
So like you said that dolphins can understand the certain calls each other make.
Mm-hmm.
Like how do they like understand that conversation?
Um, I hypothesizing it, I would think
Yeah.
because they that's the same thing with the whales. They didn't really have much
Mm.
studies on how they can interpret it, but I feel like it's just mainly the imitation behavior
Yeah.
or them learning it when they were younger and hearing it. They can still decipher what it still meant from before.
Yeah, because like for us human, like we have like language to like know, like now we're speaking English and you can
Yeah,
understand us. But
and
in
it's
dol
almost as
yeah.
if like babies up to a certain age can learn unlimited languages.
Oh
So you can
wow.
talk to a baby when they're
Uh-huh.
really really young
Uh-huh.
to I want to say it's like 3. I
Yeah.
might be wrong,
Uh-huh.
but you can talk to them in English, Spanish, French, and they will learn all 3 languages and know that after that age period because of the development in their brain.
Yeah.
So I can have my mom speak to me in English, my dad
Mm.
speak to me in Spanish, and then my grandma speak to me in French, and I
Yeah.
would still learn it, like know it when
Yeah.
I'm older. So like I could fully have 3 languages
Yeah.
without having to go to
Yeah.
school.
Like in the same time, like because like when you talk about like like definition of communication,
Hmm.
it is not just about like words, it's about like how we express it out too.
Yeah.
So like even like people speaking like different languages, we don't understand them, like the way how they like react to us or like talk to us, we could like kind of estimate like how, like what are they trying to say to us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can definitely pick up if someone is angry in a different
Oh, yeah, of
language
course.
or something just by the tones
Tones.
too, which is something very similar to like animals as well. Like dolphins have
Uh-huh.
different whistles, we have different tones.
Yeah.
And a cool example is dogs as well.
Hmm.
If you've ever seen a video of a dog when they're really happy to see their owner,
Uh-huh.
they could very happily discipline the dog,
Yeah.
and the dog would have no clue what's happening
Oh,
because
wow.
they hear the
Uh-huh.
tone and he's like, "Oh my god, you peed on the carpet. Like good.
Right.
That was such a bad thing." And like the dog is so excited because he sounds so happy to see him. But
Yeah.
if the owner would change his voice and say, "Why did you do that? That's a bad thing. Don't do that." The dog could be like, "Oh, did I do something
Yeah.
wrong?" Like it's
You
cool
get
to
into
see that
trouble.
they pick up the tones as well. So
Uh-huh.
it's interesting.
So they communicate by like estimating the tone instead of
Yeah.
like,
I honestly think that dogs can understand us too, to a certain extent.
yeah.
To a certain extent. I don't think they can understand the full sentences,
Right.
but if I say walk
Huh?
or like ride to my dog,
Yeah.
he knows exactly what's happening.
Um,
So I feel like they kind of pick up on the tones or like the sounds
yeah.
because I don't know if there's been studies on dogs learning language.
Yeah, like especially like us, like we're trying to like mimic dogs, like ruff, ruff,
Yeah.
like the dog won't understand like what we're trying to say, but
Yeah.
like they know that we're like trying to bark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's interesting.
Yeah, so let's go to like the communication of whales. So killer whales have like varieties of communication, right?
Hmm.
So what is it?
They have clicks, calls,
Clicks.
and whistles.
Uh-huh.
So the clicks are usually based for echolocation.
Uh-huh.
So if I were, say, across the ocean,
Mhm.
I want to say like 10 meters, 15 meters,
Mhm.
and I produced a click sound,
Yeah.
that would be used as to show that I'm 10, 15 meters away because they can
Oh,
hear the distance or like hear how far it could be.
wow.
Yeah, because they use echolocation is just basically using sound to find a
Mhm.
location or where someone is.
Yeah.
So they produce that sound so that other whales from their pod can hear that they're close, they're far, they're coming closer, stuff like that.
Yeah,
Um,
but like for example, if they're like 15 meters away and they just like put a louder sound, because like every dog, like us, like as human, like when we speak, like everyone have a different tone, different
mm-hmm.
like the way we like my normal voice might be like more like louder than you, right?
Yeah,
So like for whales or dolphins can be the same. So like how would they estimate it?
I'm not sure how they estimate it, honestly.
Hmm.
I didn't read any of that
Yeah,
on my thing, but I kind of want to look it up. How do whales
yeah.
estimate echolocation? Let's see. Um, Dolphins and whales use echolocation by bouncing high-pitched clicking
Hmm.
sounds off of underwater objects. Similar to shouting and listening to echoes, the sounds are made by squeezing air through their nasal passages
Yeah.
near the blowhole. So I would assume that it bounces off of objects in the water, so like corals and like reefs and stuff, so that they can see what's how far.
Like the estimation of the
Yeah,
echo.
or
Yeah.
how loud. I want to say it's how
How
loud
loud.
that sound is. Because the closer you are, the
Hmm.
louder it'll be. The further
Right.
away, it's quieter.
Yeah.
Um, and maybe even the vibrations too.
Wow.
I want to say because sound is a vibration.
Yes, it is.
So I feel like if it were based on vibrations as well, they can feel it in their ears or something.
Hmm.
I don't know. That might be wrong.
Yep.
Don't fact check me or
Well,
don't quote me.
let's go to like the second question, which is like, why do you say that killer whales have a variety of different calls for different situations regarding them in group or out group?
So basically, they have different varieties of calls because there's two different types of killer whales: the transient and the resident killer whales.
Okay.
So let me see. The social sounds that are coming from the killer whales make our post calls, which are used for like group cohesion, try and keep everyone in the same pod together, coordinate behaviors, and like mediate group recognition.
Yeah.
The resident killers are the ones that usually are only eating fish as their main prey, not anything bigger. Transient killer whales are the ones that eat more mammals as their prey, so bigger fish and different animals. The two type of they've been investigated both similarly very much. Um, I'm trying to see the calls can be for some of them are this is kind of funny. They can eavesdrop
What?
on
Oh,
yeah. So they have a tendency
wow.
to give out calls that are not intended to be received
Oh,
by
wow.
any other specific whale. So it
Yeah.
stops other whales from
Mhm.
eavesdropping on what they're doing.
Oh,
So it's almost similar to like cheetahs finding
just
prey.
yeah.
If or like hyenas. So if
Mhm.
like one hyena finds prey
Yeah.
and like they could make a call out to their group. I don't know what a group of hyenas are called. Um, but if they make that call out, other hyenas could probably hear it because they
Yeah.
might be in the same radius
Uh-huh.
and want to try and get it. So it's the same thing like killer whales. They'll do the
Mhm.
same thing if they're trying to go for prey
Yeah.
or something and they see it, they'll make a different call after that call to try
Yeah.
and avoid conflict,
Oh,
which is
wow.
interesting. So like their calls can be used for psyching people out, like different
Right.
whales out, echolocation,
Mhm.
mediation, stuff like
Right.
that.
So what I'm like curious about is that um instead of like saying like yelling it out, like because it's in group and out group, so like
Mm-hmm.
do they have like a specific like sound to the in group saying that, oh, like for example the sound ah, it's gonna be like for the in group it's gonna be, oh, there's a prey there, but like for other in group like there's a prey there, it's like their like signal's gonna be like a B.
Yeah,
So
I see what you're saying. I think so, because whales learn their calls
yeah.
from their mothers.
Uh-huh.
So I feel like in that group,
Mm-hmm.
the mothers might have that same similar calls in a
Yeah.
pod, and those offspring will also learn those. I think they're exact replicas, if
Oh
I'm not
wow.
mistaken. So it's different than dolphins because they kind of
Mhm.
pick and play,
Yeah.
and the whales take the exact call, I want to say, or something like very, very similar to their
Right.
moms. So
But
I feel like if it's in
uh-huh.
an in group, they would know, and in the out group, they wouldn't know that call because they didn't get it from that mom.
Like when you say mimic, like is the sound exactly the same between like male and females or
I don't know if it's the same between male and females, but I
mm,
know it would be, it depends on what, if the mother has a male or female
yeah.
whale. So I feel like if, say, your mom
Mhm.
had a brother,
Right.
that brother's call would be the same as the mom's
Mhm.
and vice versa with females. So
Right.
then that male would grow up and
Mhm.
have, so they would basically create an in group
Right.
with that offspring going more and more,
Mhm.
and vice versa.
Right. So like just now you mentioned about echolocation, like what is that? Like can you talk more?
Echolocation is basically the main use for killer
Mhm.
whales.
Yeah.
It's just to see detecting
Yeah.
where other whales are that could be from that same pod.
Right.
So the clicks are usually detected in a parameter of like 3 kilometers,
Mhm.
and a complete sequence of it can be detected at 1 kilometer.
Oh.
So they're both have resident and transient have
Mhm.
different echolocation clicks because they are different prey eating
Mhm.
animals. Transient usually have typically quieter calls. And then I obviously think that resident is a little bit bigger or louder.
Mhm.
Um, I'm trying to see. It's actually interesting that it says that one of the studies I found that in the environment and human interference doesn't alter the sound.
Wait, what?
So like if there's whales trying to send out echolocation callings, boats or like just like the water crashing if it's a hard day on the sea won't affect the sound.
Oh, wow.
So like no matter what their call is, they can hear, because it's almost like a dog whistle. Have you ever tried to hear a dog whistle?
Oh no, I did
We
not.
can't hear them. So our ears can't pick up dog whistles, but if you blow in a dog whistle, the dog can hear it.
Oh, is it that whistle that when you blow it, you just hear like wind sound coming out?
Yeah, but it's actually a whistle in the dog's ear.
Oh wow!
So it's like the same thing. Like boats, if there was a boat passing by a pod of whales and they were sending out echolocation callings, it wouldn't be altered. Like those whales could still, like 3 kilometers away, still be able to pick it up.
Do you think it's because of like the frequencies differences?
Yeah, I think so too. It's the same way as dogs as well. But it can also probably deal with the depth as well too. Right. If they were higher on the surface, it might have an interference, but I don't know, because it might be a different frequency than the boat.
Right. Well, that's all I got. Thank you so much. Do you have anything you want to say to the viewers?
No.
No.
I don't know. Animals and psychology is pretty interesting though.
It is. All right. Thank you so much, Sam. Let's wrap it up here.